Good morning. My name is Dr. Minji Parker. I'm a professor of criminal justice here at Indiana University East. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of you for coming out and participating in our legislative forum today. We'll begin shortly. I'd like to begin by acknowledging some of our administrators who are good enough to come out and join us this morning. We have Director of Gift Development, Ray Buchholz, is with us. And of special note this morning, we have our Chancellor, Dr. Dennis Rome, who would like to say a few words of welcome. So, without further ado, Chancellor Rome.
Thank you, Minji. It's one of our star professors in criminal justice, and Lord knows we need some good people in that area. So, hello and welcome. I'm so happy you're spending this happy, misty Friday with us today. We always like to welcome our community members to our campus, so thank you for coming out. So for over 25 years, IU East has hosted these legislative forums. As an institution of higher education, we're committed to open dialogue and collaboration. One of the things you hear me say every time I have the opportunity to stand before the public is I am very, very pro-collaboration. We cannot affect and promote the progress of our students without all the community entities and so on. So I'm happy to be part of this dialogue and collaboration. Not only our government representatives, but also our community as a whole. We value the work of our representatives and are honored to host them. So I'd like to thank you, Senator Raatz and Representative Barrett, for joining us this morning. And thank you for your work for the citizens of this area. And thank you, community members who are here today. These conversations can foster transparency. And I heard before I arrived to the area that these two representatives really promote transparency. So keep that in mind during your comments. They're here to share information with us. IU East is proud to be a part of this community. Everywhere you go, you will surely be in contact with one of our 14,000 alumni. Over 85% choose to live and work in our service region. They are thankful to call this home. And again, thank you to each of you for attending, and I will welcome Minji back to the podium.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to get started. We're going to give our representatives. We have Representative Dr. Brad Barrett, and we also have Senator Jeff Raatz with us. They've agreed to spend some time talking with us today and giving us some ideas about the great work that's being done in the legislature and to take some questions from you about different things you have on your mind. After we give them an opportunity to introduce themselves and to give you an update on things that are happening in the legislature, we'll take questions from the audience like we normally do. If you have a question, just raise your hand and we'll have a microphone brought to you. I would ask that you limit yourself to one question to start with so that we give everyone else an opportunity to ask their question. And I'm going to ask you to limit your question to about 2 minutes. And I'll give you time updates as you're going. And that's simply so that our legislators have time to respond to your concerns. Okay? All right. So without further ado, we'll start in no specific order. Representative Barrett.
Alphabetically.
Yes.
We good. Well, good morning, Dr. Parker, and thank you particularly to IU East for hosting this event. It's a great venue, and it is an opportunity for us to interact. So I am in the middle of my third term. They're 2-year terms, so I feel like I'm either running or getting ready to run, and it's been an extremely busy term. We're in a short session, which means we worked on the budget last year, and so this year is a 10-week session that we've really committed to maybe even doing in 8.5 or 9 weeks. But the pace has just been extremely busy. I had worked just down the road at Reed for 25 years in this community, and I just love the community. And upon retirement, I wanted an opportunity to continue to serve the community and maintain some relevance in the direction of our community, and that's why I ran, and I've found that to be incredibly satisfying at the state level. I currently chair the committee, House Committee on Public Health, which has been a great honor and a privilege. Probably accounts for 80% of the time that I spend over there. Sometimes frustrates me. When I first joined the Assembly, I was on Ways and Means, and that was a committee that had really a broad application, so about anything that came through any of our committees ultimately came through Ways and Means, and so it was a great introduction to the process. But then once I was named chair of the Health Committee, then they stopped that participation on Ways and Means because of time. And initially I kicked and screamed, I love this committee, I don't want to be on it. And now there's no way, there's absolutely no way I could have done that. So I realized that my slot is in healthcare. I also serve on Insurance Committee and on the Ag and Rural Development Committee, and I absolutely love those committees as well. So we started first week of January, and we are actually approaching the halfway point already at this point, and just the pace of legislating has been incredibly fast. We'll, I guess, talk about some more of the issues as we get into our discussions, but again, thanks for coming today, and thank you for inviting us.
Thank you. Senator Raatz?
Thank you, Dr. Parker, and it is good to be here this morning. Good to see familiar faces in the crowd. It has been an incredible beginning this session, no doubt about it. On day one, the schedule got packed immediately, and so it's meeting after meeting, and then running from one room to the next, trying to keep up with everything. I too love IU. I attained a master's degree from this building right here, as well as my daughter graduated and became a nurse, and so we have some deep roots in this community. And along with Brad, even though I've not lived here all my life, I love Indiana, and I love Richmond, Indiana. I'm a Michigan native, and that's a place to visit, but Indiana's home, and so we've been here since 1998. I serve as the education chairman in the Senate. When I have a background in education, really since I guess I graduated from college. I went back and taught as an adjunct for a couple of years, and then in some way, shape, or form, in most of those years, I've been involved on the peripheral piece of education, both post that part in K-12. And I started on the Education Committee because of that. As Representative Barrett kind of alluded to, the General Assembly is part-time, and one of the good things about it is that if we have experience or backgrounds in certain areas, those are generally speaking where we'll be pointed at when we get there, because it's an expertise. And of course, at the same time, then there are ethical issues at times we have to be careful of, and so there's an ethics committee, I'm sure in the House, there certainly is on the Senate side, to make sure that we're not crossing that line. Occasionally someone will step away from a vote, specifically because and I remember exactly one time there's a man in the Senate who is a retired DNR officer, and because it was part of their pension to give them a raise, he stepped out and just doesn't participate. So we try very, very much so to make sure that we don't cross those lines, especially if we're currently in. Not everybody has retired, like Representative Barrett, but some are still active in those areas, and so we have to be careful with that. So it has been an incredibly busy year. It's not a marathon by any means. It's a 100,000-mile-an-hour sprint, it seems like, most of the time. So I really enjoy doing what I'm doing. It's not always easy. Most of the time it's not that easy, but it's still good work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So at this time, we'll open up for questions. If anyone has a question for our legislators, please just raise your hand, and we'll have the mic brought over, and we'll get started. Any questions? Everyone's being shy this morning. I know it's early. Okay.
As I'm sure you both know, you've seen the amount of money that is being funneled away from public education into private education with the school voucher program. Increasingly, a number of students in higher income families are now able to qualify for those vouchers, which continues the bleed of funding from our public education system. A majority of children in our area attend public schools. How do you justify supporting school voucher programs when you see the money coming away from our students in the public education program?
Well, I'll begin by saying this, that the majority of people, I believe, desire to have school choice. And that is part of the preface of what you're speaking of. And so whether that's a virtual school, whether it's a charter school, whether it's a voucher school, I believe is what you're alluding to. But there are 4 or 5 different venues of which parents can choose to send their students to. And that is the desire of the voters of the state of Indiana. Now, does it take money away from your school? You could look at it that way. But the answer to that question is, are we educating those students, and does the state have an obligation to educate students? The answer is yes. If they choose to go left or right or down the center of the road, I think is where the rub is. And the second piece of that is some of those dollars that we talk about, and I don't think you're alluding to that, but often I get hit with X amount of money that it's cost public institutions since the beginning of school choice, let's put it that way. That partially is true and partially not true, because if we didn't fund other choices for students and parents, we don't know what student is going to go to a private school or a voucher school or a virtual school, if the parents pay for it, if they don't pay for it. So that's my answer to you, is ultimately it's parental choice, and I believe the voters of the state of Indiana have supported that over time, and I can't apologize for that.
You know, I would say that, you know, these policies have developed over the years, and, you know, the ultimate goal is the best education for our kids. And I, as a parent, you know, I was glad to have options. My kids, I have one that was a product of Richmond High School. I have one that was ultimately a product of Seton, and it was an alternative that was available to us when I wasn't, you know, 100% sure that everything was going in the right direction. So I think overall that competition drives excellence, and we want excellent education for our kids, and it pressures the system to produce the best product, and it's in education, it's in healthcare, it's in everything that we do. The formula in Indiana, the money follows the child, and the Supreme Court decided that met the test, and so it's not in violation of any federal rule, and in my opinion, it offers the opportunity for the best option for each individual child. The other thing is, you know, school choice is not just choice to charter schools and Catholic schools. I think here we have a small Catholic school, but the majority of schools in this district are public schools, and parents actually have a choice amongst those public schools, which adds an element of competition. So I think, you know, the school itself is empowered to provide transparency and excellence in education, and the parent is driving the decision, and in my opinion, it is the opportunity for the child to get educated in the best way possible.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have another question? Don't be bashful. There we are.
Yes, I wear my mask, Dr. Barrett. And the reason I wear it is that COVID is still around, and I have not had COVID. Okay. My question is in regards to the healthcare crisis that I would say that women right here are facing in Indiana. We are piss poor, about how we care for our maternity women, how we care for our women that need help, and our mental health for our women, and that affects children and the family. And I'm just wondering how we can help get the maternity care and the women's care that is needed with hospitals closing, OB services, rural hospitals closing, and how Indiana can get its act together in getting health care taken care of.
Well, Elect, although I appreciate your question, I disagree with your conclusion. I mean, I feel that as a state in the last 2 years, we have made an incredible investment in not just maternal health, but paternal health and infant health, a huge commitment to education. We spend $20 billion a year on health care. Substitute health care wherever I say education in this question.
Education's part of it.
Yeah, and so it's unbelievable the investment we have made in the maternal infant arena. We established a maternal mortality review committee through the Department of Health and collecting data over the last 5 years. And what often happens in that setting is, as you collect data, you get better at collecting data, and the initial numbers were horrible. And as they drilled down on the reasons for that, they identified that a lot of these things weren't related to the pregnancies, but related to mental health and addiction, to violence, to suicide, to educational opportunities. So not only has that been directly addressed through like maternal family nurse partnerships and through My Healthy Baby, these are programs that are being rolled out all over the state. We've expanded our Medicaid coverage for women for up to a year or to a year after giving birth, where it used to expire after 90 days. The problem is it takes time for all these things to move the needle, but there's 100% commitment to health. In addition, we recognize that the treatment of disease is often late to the game, and it's prevention and education. And last year, we as a state committed to educating in public health, allowing absolute local control of the decisions and matches from local governments. But I've been extremely proud of the investments and the programs and the efforts that we've made to address that very issue. Are we having trouble with increasing rolls on Medicaid? Yes. Are we having trouble with this curve of spending in the area? Absolutely. Are our rural areas struggling? Well, they are. Both healthcare, property tax dollars, population, education, those are all challenges. This very COVID that you referred to, I thought was going to shift people into the rural areas, into our less densely populated areas, into areas where you could realize there was great quality of life, where we have great hospital and great universities and just great opportunities. So it's a complicated mess, but I can tell you that I'm proud of the efforts that have occurred over the last 3 years in this arena, and I look for those numbers to do nothing but improve.
And obviously, it's not my expertise, but I would say, if you all been paying attention, that, and I'm sure Representative Barrett is in the middle of this conversation too, but the state, all of a sudden, we found out that our budget was $1 billion shy of what it should have been. And so oftentimes, and I'm sure most legislators get this comment, well, you got $2.5 billion surplus sitting around, just spend some of that doing this. Well, when things like this happen, like the $1 billion shortfall, the state has to be ready to keep things moving. And so, first of all, I want to say that the fiscal health of this state, while at times may have neglected some of the healthcare pieces, and there was a group of folks who sat down, now we're probably 3 years past that, I would guess, and looked at all these things. In fact, Luke Kenley was I would call him the general architect of the budget of Indiana overall for years, and made the statement, we probably have neglected health care to our detriment. Now it's time for us to get it taken care of, and so we've been going in that direction for a number of years. I don't pretend to know all of it, but as Dr. Barrett mentioned, Medicaid is on the increase. One metric that is of great concern for us is that the number of families who have children have crossed over the 50% mark. Those children are born on Medicaid, so we're about 52, 53%. That's concerning for the future of Indiana. So there are a lot of things going on. The federal government continues to add requirements, and that the state has to pay part of those things as well. And the issue with the $1 billion shortfall, it appears, at least in some conversations, we've got some of that covered, but we're on the tab for that. Taxpayers are, so we just have to be careful, but we do recognize and are trying to do our very best. The issue of rural hospitals is a very real one. We're fortunate here in Wayne County to have Reed, and as if you've all been paying attention, they're struggling to keep their budget in the right space as well. So there's some foundational issues, I think, overall with our health system in the United States, not just Indiana. And so trying to walk that line is not going to be easy for us all, but Indiana's in a good spot to be able to handle it and continue to move forward. At times, it's probably not going to be easy.
Okay, thank you. Do we have another question? There we are.
There we go.
Hi. So, as you may or may not be aware, here in Wayne County, we have an animal welfare problem happening right now. I'm currently the director at Help the Animals, so I'm here specifically for House Bill 1412, which is being voted on Monday morning. That's the Canine Standards of Care, otherwise known as the Puppy Mill Bill. So I'm just asking to oppose that because especially in Wayne County, we do not need any more loose animals. And I can tell you they get 3 months at a breeder before they end up in my shelter, because if they can't sell them, they're coming to the shelter. So we're big right now. There's a lot of discussion about animal welfare. We have some federal money coming here to help with it. So that's my big thing, is just to talk about that, the animal welfare in Indiana in general, and that's a big bill that's coming up. So I'll also be there Monday morning.
Well, thank you for that question. And I can speak to that because I sit on the Agriculture Rural Development Committee, so we discuss that. And it's funny how we take these bills that are like incredibly complicated. I don't know if that's a 15, 19-page bill, and then we label it, you label it Puppy Mill Bill. I label it Increase the Quality of Dogs in the State Bill. And last year, there was a huge discussion about, here's the issue. There were communities in the state that decided that their pet stores could not sell dogs and cats. And the animal rights activists came in and said, hey, there's a glut of these animals, and so you should only be getting your animals from shelters and rescues. And there was a lot of debate. Matter of fact, twice we heard about it in committee, probably 5 hours of testimony. And so, as oftentimes happens, the effort in its previous form failed. But what they did was they teamed with the Animal Board of Health in Indiana and with Purdue University, and there's a canine certification program that Purdue has developed. And obviously, it's increasingly common in Indiana, but it's all over the U.S. and particularly the Midwest. And essentially what we did was we built into this bill efforts that improve the standards for breeders and for pet stores. We gave consumers remedy for purchases so that it would keep dogs out of shelters and rescues. It would improve the quality and the stock of the pets being sold. And then it would actually elevate the bar. So I the way it's sometimes being misinterpreted, I think in reality you want me to vote for that bill because it increases the standard. And I think there's even a hope that we'll be able to spill some of these standards then into the rescues and into the shelters. I think I read in the paper the other day where you're getting some additional funding sources through the health program or through the county government, which I think is an awesome thing. So I look at this from a different perspective, and I see an incredible change in that bill. And what it's doing is it's allowing free market. It's raising the standard, and I'm comfortable with the changes. I think it's been misrepresented to many people over the last year. I think a year ago it was not in the right spot, and I'm glad they put a lot of effort into it, but I think it's in a much better place.
I am aware that the bill is out there, and that's all I can say at this point, 'cause it hasn't made it across the other side of the building, and so I can't speak to it really at all.
Yeah, we're just finishing up on it, and actually one of our Democrat members added an amendment to it on second reading yesterday, so it's actually developed into a bipartisan bill. And then I know it's coming over to your side in February, and have talked to a couple of the people over there, Senator Dorio and Senator Lysing. But in these short sessions where things move fast, I have very little understanding of what's going on in that half of the building, and vice versa. But so on this one, I can speak to it. Haven't been on committee. I think we're getting that thing into a great spot, and there's still an opportunity to really improve it. To your point.
Okay, thank you. Next question?
Don't be shy. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, I wanted to thank Senator Raatz for sponsoring a bill for the Treasurers Association. Looks like it's moving forward, and it was much needed. The other question I have, as I hear everyone talk about funding, property tax caps is part of what keeps the funding from not growing on the property tax level. Do you ever see that being repealed?
That's when Mitch Daniels was governor, and when they created the concept of property tax caps, it became constitutional. So the Constitution of the state would have to change in order to change it. But I will say this, on every issue, when I say right and left, I'm not saying Republican or Democrat, there's both sides to every story. So we have gotten an incredible amount of pushback from folks on property tax increases simply because of the assessed values, and if the local unit was not at their tax caps, then things changed. And so I'm sure Representative Barrett, same thing. If we didn't have caps on them, maybe you all would get in trouble for it, but we usually get in trouble for that. And so that's my comment back. There are other ways to fill those gaps, and even talking about, at least right now, we had a bill in appropriations yesterday that would eliminate property tax completely. Now it's very forward thinking. It's just a beginning of conversation, but that's how you sometimes, to get it to the table, you put a bill out there with full intention it's going to get a hearing, and that's it. Just to begin the conversation to figure out different ways to do this. Could it be, if we did that, we have to replace the revenue, and oftentimes we get, well, it's cheaper in Ohio for one reason or another, or a neighboring state. For us, it's Ohio. Well, what we don't understand, in Ohio, they have school tax on their property tax bill separately from their property tax, and they are able to increase sales tax county by county should they choose to, just different ways that allow additional revenue for localities and the state. So I often say they're getting the revenue from somewhere, the government's getting it from someplace. It's just a matter of how it all comes together and what portions that come from different streams. I think a fair tax is, my only comment yesterday was we want to make sure that we're fair across the board for all different levels of income. And So we're looking at it very closely, I would say, and so off into the future. In fact, I'll tell you what the premise of that bill was. We have, as a state, we all have been putting aside $1 billion annually to shore up a pre-96 pension fund. It's not just teachers, I don't believe, it's all state workers that was left behind. And so presently, we believe in 2030 that will be done. And if we continue to operate at a surplus, we've been putting an additional billion or even more than that over the past 2 budget cycles to help pay that thing off. And the premise behind this one was that $1 billion that we're accustomed to spending, we're going to put it in a pot and send it back to the communities and then try to figure out a different way. Now, it's just the beginning, and I would say it was a dart thrown at the board just to get the conversation going, to take a look at just how we function. I'm probably glad there are no farmers in the room this morning, but a chart that I looked at yesterday, a bar chart, farm grounds paying the bulk of all the property tax, and that can be argued as well. What portion of it should they be paying with the revenues that they get off the ground? All those are deep questions, but I suspect if we can keep the conversation going, we'll be looking at some of those things. But we're talking probably a decade of conversation, because that's huge. But great question.
Yeah, it's always a balance. Those that contribute would ultimately like to contribute less. Those that use would ultimately like to have more. And so, it's our role to kind of be the intermediary in that and decide a balance. So I kind of forgotten the point that we put that into the Constitution, so there's no easy fix to that. But I tell you what my approach has been is if that is truly capped on local dollars, then what can we do as a state to funnel more dollars into our communities, like grants for law enforcement and safety, grants for road funding, public health investments. Everything the state shifts over here is one less dollar that the county has to spend. Record investments in education. All those things bring money into your community so that then your community has the ability to spend the money that's been limited by the tax cap.
The last comment on that one, and I don't disagree with Representative Barrett, but I'd simply say, generally speaking, when the state gets involved and we send money, there are strings attached that are a little more stringent and done by the General Assembly. It's just the way it is. It's the federal government's the same way. They send dollars in, and you got to check the box and cross the T and dot the I in order to get it, and then maintain it. So. I'm not much into large government at the higher levels. I'd rather it operate at the local level than you all had more say in it.
Okay, thank you. Do we have another question? Yeah.
As a licensed clinical social worker and a parent of two school-aged children, I'm deeply concerned by Senate Bill 50. I'm not sure how far that has gotten so far. That would allow chaplains with 2 years of counseling experience to be able to be school counselors. They are not trained to be therapists. They are not trained in the same interventions that licensed therapists are trained in. And I understand that there is a need to be creative because of the huge mental health concerns that our students are experiencing right now and the lack of licensed social workers in the state. But I don't believe that that is the solution to the problem because of the lack of training that chaplains have in counseling. They get like counseling light, but when you're a licensed clinical social worker, you get intensive training, you have 2 years under clinical supervision, and then you have to pass an exam. And so there's a huge difference between a licensed clinical social worker or licensed mental health counselor and a chaplain. So I'd like to hear where your thoughts on that are and if you're planning to move forward with that bill.
I appreciate the question and for paying attention, and I agree with you partially. A couple of things about that bill, and I did support it and did come out of committee yesterday, or Wednesday, excuse me. A couple of things. The requirement for the chaplain in that case that they have to have an MDiv, which is it's incredibly intense, more so than what we would consider as an average master's degree level degree. Now, that said, the concept of them going in and counseling kids is not the idea of that bill. The idea of that bill is social and emotional support. It might be sitting at a table during lunchtime and befriending students. And so I think it's being overblown out there. I do agree with you on the concept of the limited counselors, and a couple of things that I did last year with that piece was establish a career coaching concept to come alongside so that a lot of the burden wouldn't be broad, but help maybe counselors that are in the K-12 space to spend time with the social and emotional issues, and then the career space could be taken care of separately with collaboration continually, knowing that everybody's got a stake in the game here to make sure a student would know, generally speaking, what I like to say is maybe what they were created for, and get the right classwork or coursework along the way if they're going either headed to higher ed or if they're going potentially into the workforce, so they got the skill set available, at least base skill set available. So my answer is, on a very simple level, is that it's not intended to do what you're suggesting. And some of those, I know it's out there. I've served as a chaplain for adults for 12 years and currently do, and I'm going to that organization when I leave here this morning. But all that stuff starts based on friendship. And of course, students are more vulnerable. It's not adult to adult. And so it's not, it happens today. Nothing stops it from happening. We heard testimony that many school districts utilize, pastors may come in and spend time in the school system just to help guide and direct students. And so this legitimizes it, I guess. It's not I don't view it as a way to help the counseling profession at all. I see it as a way to help maybe build those students up personally some, find out that adults do care about them in different capacities, in different ways. But in no means was it created to do to divide or to provide professional counseling services. Let me put it that way.
I would then advocate that when you do see the bill, that you change the wording from counseling to mentoring, because what you're describing is a mentorship. But what is being seen is that it is a counselor relationship, and those are two very, very different things. And with all due respect, a master's in divinity is not a master's in counseling or social work. I understand that it is a higher level degree. I get that. But I just want to make sure that it's clear that when this bill moves forward, it's not about counseling, it's about mentorship, because those words have meaning and they carry a lot of weight.
100%. Don't disagree with you whatsoever. And let me just at least make the last comment, or I don't have to be the last word standing by any means. But we also have to realize that parents want different things for their students also. We're still, even in the K-12 space, could that be possible? I think the answer is yes. But that could be on an individual basis as well. And so there's no one-size-fits-all. As you know, in your profession, that everyone is different and come from different backgrounds and have all different reasons why they're the way they are, so positive or negative. So, but I appreciate the concern. I think we've addressed it. We'll see the way it comes out of the House to make sure. There's a sister bill in the House, as I understand, as well. I don't know if you've seen it yet, but I believe there's one over there as well.
You know, this one may be one that kind of crosses education and healthcare in a sense in terms of mental health space. And, you know, with professionals in our state, there's always this balance between access to those professionals, the cost of the services, and then the quality of the service. And I know on both sides we make efforts to never sacrifice that quality thing, to keep the bar high. So I respect your point. I deal with this in healthcare every day. hygienists want to do what dentists do. Optometrists want to do what ophthalmologists do. Wherever there's a stratification of services provided, somebody always wants to do more. And my charge has always been, you know, the opportunity for promotion and independence in some of these avenues is through education, not through legislation. So I'm extremely sensitive to that in what we deal with in the healthcare space. I can tell you, in terms of having dealt with the social workers that come over, I believe we're working on a compact for them. Are you familiar with? Yeah, so I think there's a compact. So what we've recognized is that there are shortages, and so instead of, you know, options are backfilling and allowing somebody to help provide supplemental services in that space, not to cannibalize the services. The other option is to increase the access to providers in our state. And I'm telling you, we've done this in about 6 or 7 different professions: physicians, nursing, occupational therapists, physical therapists, dentists, dental hygienists, and I believe licensed clinical social workers. We're working on compacts where there's transferability with licensure so that we can get a provider from another state. We can get maybe a military person that moves state to state into this space so that they can fill the gaps, so increasing the access to care. And then I think we also, a couple years ago, increased some of the clinical abilities of social workers in our space in terms of the ability to make diagnosis in the mental health space. So it's on the radar. I respect your point of view. This is an issue of maintaining quality and increasing access.
Okay, thank you. Do we have another question? Yep, there we are.
Good morning. I live over in the Western Wayne School District. So is this on? Okay,
Yes.
thank you. I came here not wanting to say anything, but this is an interesting conversation. Property taxes. For those of us who are retired, and I'm now 10 years into it, we're looking at the appraisal factor. And that was very interesting. And I understand the Republicans have a study committee that's examining taxes. So please do this, because my property taxes went up just a little over 8% this past year. And my son-in-law, who lives about 2 miles from me, his property tax didn't move at all. So this is the issue of how the appraisals are being done to raise the value of property. First item, look at the governor's executive authority. For the COVID issue, he had carte blanche. And I'm suggesting that, and I've heard some ideas, that maybe the legislature needs to put some teeth into how much administrative executive authority the governor has, and set it up in 30 and 60 and 90-day periods so that the legislature has a say in it. And I wish you would have been a bit more aggressive 2 years ago, but it is what it is. Agricultural land, we're gobbling up quite a bit of agricultural land, and Dr. Barrett, you indicate you're on that committee. I grew up around Lebanon, Indiana, on that side of the state, and what are there, 10,000 acres now that's being taken out of production, and I'm aware of where that land is located. And this is, again, a concept to develop from Indianapolis to Purdue, up I-65, a place for development and industry. So that's an awful lot of land to be taken out of production, in my view. And I hope that the committee that's looking at that, and I think Gene Lysing's on that committee, will see what we can do about not just continuing to pull agricultural land out for development. And the other thing I noticed, I'm probably over my 2 minutes.
Yes,
the lady brought up the issue of the pets. And I was in the business for 25 years of selling feed and farm supplies, and that included pet food. And I can only tell you that when we got into the business, you could buy a super premium dog food for about $20 a bag. Today, that same bag is about $70. And it was 40 pounds 25 years ago, and now it's 34 pounds. This is a whole issue, that and veterinary costs. And what we observed in our time in the business was that people got acquired pets, cats and dogs, and for reasons unknown to us, they had to let them go.
Okay. And I apologize for interrupting, but we do need to let our representatives have an opportunity to respond to those 3 items. So, yes.
Go ahead, Brett.
Well, no, I mean, I can real quickly say there are committees looking at that now. Hey, the good news, your property increased in value. Hey, the bad news, you only recognize that when you sell it, right? So in the meantime, your property tax goes up. I see there has been a correction. If you look at land prices in Indiana where they peaked in the last year or two, they're now on the decline. And unfortunately, there's not a real-time appraisal service. It's done on, I think, a yearly basis. I may be wrong. On the ag land issue, Representative Culp from Farm Bureau had a bill last year that has created a land inventory for the state. And it addresses multiple things: farmland, wetlands, forest, land that's owned by foreign governments, land that's used for solar or wind production, recognizing that agriculture is incredible contribution to our state's economy, although ultimately people have their property rights. You own the land within reason in terms of zoning and those kind of things. You know, it's your land to use and to sell. But I think the state has recognized that we want oversight to make sure and identify trends in one direction or another.
Some great questions. I'll first address the governor's ability to go for, I think he went 18 months. I don't know the exact number of months, but I think that's about what it was under executive order in emergency. There is a bill on the Senate side that limits that to 30 days, and it's silent post that, which means the General Assembly will be called back in order to deal with it. And there's some, there's a lot of pieces of that puzzle. So that do we as 150 people understand everything? We got to collect the information and begin to move forward. So there is a bill to begin to look at that piece. It's on the table in the Senate right now. We'll see if it comes out the other side, and of course then it'll have to go through the House. That's one way of dealing with it. And to go on just a little bit about the assessed value, everything has gone up. We know that. Even your insurance bills have gone up for your homes, for your cars, because of inflation and the cost of maybe attaining the parts for a car for repair. Everything has gone up. Indiana's fairly, we're in a good spot. I looked at a list of states earlier this week, the top 10, and I sheepishly opened and looked and said, oh, Lord, I don't want Indiana to be on there, and we're not. But the cost of everything has gone up because of inflation. And you can remember back in COVID, and we did have conversation this week, the supply chain hasn't caught up since 2020 yet either fully. It's almost there, but there's still a lag, and we probably all of us are still maybe experiencing that depending on exactly what we spend our money on. The other piece of that puzzle, and I'm not making excuses by any means, but we also have to take into consideration the cost of local government and be able to compete with increased wages and everything that we want and expect to be, the roads to be cleaned and all that has to be part of that equation as well. So it's a result of inflation across the board. And so it filters and continues. I like to say that insurance is kind of the end of the stream. Now we're starting to see it in our homes and our car insurance. And so, but I would agree with Representative Barrett. I hope we're at the end of that and beginning to slide in the other direction. But it's all the pieces of the puzzle that are part of the problem. The supply chain, and now the wages have increased. I'm not arguing about that, but I highly doubt that that's going to go down. And so COVID changed things.
Thank you. Well, unfortunately, that's just about all the time we have for today. And it's always the way, you know, it was just as time is running out, things are getting really good. But would like to thank Representative Barrett and Senator Raatz for coming out and spending some time with us today. I'd like to thank all of our community partners for coming out. And stay tuned to your normal IU East channels. We are currently trying to schedule a second legislative forum where you'll have more opportunities to talk with our representatives and ask other questions. And as soon as we can get those scheduled, we will announce them. Other than that, everybody have a great day and be safe driving home. Thank you.